I first saw her in the corner of the cafe, the late afternoon light falling across her hair like it had a life of its own. She was older, definitely older than me, and yet something about the way she stirred her coffee made time bend. She didn't notice me at first. I was just another 20-something hunched over a notebook, pretending I wasn't staring, but I noticed everything. The subtle crease in her forehead when she frowned at her phone, the tiny tremor in her hand when she set down the cup, the way her eyes lingered on the world with a kind of quiet longing that was impossible to ignore. I almost laughed at myself for feeling this way, embarrassed, really. She probably wouldn't even glance at me if she knew I existed outside of this dim corner. And yet I wanted to. I wanted her to notice me. She glanced up then, catching me by accident, and I swear the air shifted. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more like recognition of a familiar, unspoken secret. I turned away, heart thudding, pretending to scribble in my notebook. My pen scratched louder than usual. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She was someone else's world, someone older, someone careful. And I was just me, a kid fumbling through the edges of life. But I couldn't stop thinking about her, the way her laughter spilled over when she spoke to the barista, light but deliberate, as if she was measuring the joy she allowed herself. She had that way about her, commanding attention without even trying. I tried to focus on my notebook, on homework, on anything but the magnetic pull of her presence. My mind betrayed me. Every so often, I found my eyes tracing the line of her jaw, the faint scar above her eyebrow, the way her scarf slid slightly as she adjusted her posture. My chest tightened, and I felt an unnameable mix of awe and dread. Then she spoke out of nowhere, softly enough that I almost didn't hear. "Don't tell your friend you like me better," she said, tilting her head with a teasing gravity. Her words caught me off guard, playful, dangerous, intimate in a way that made my stomach lurch. I choked on my own thoughts for a second, unsure whether I should laugh, curse, or melt right there on the floor. I wanted to tell her everything and nothing at the same time. But I didn't. I simply nodded, which probably looked ridiculous, and my pen faltered mid-word. Her eyes held mine longer than they should have, and I could feel it, an invisible line drawn between us. Crossing it would be reckless, thrilling, inevitable. The cafe seemed smaller suddenly, the background chatter softer, the smell of coffee sharper, more urgent. I wanted to lean in, just a little, to see if she'd flinch or lean too. She brushed her hair behind her ear, and my fingers itched as if I could reach through space and touch the movement. Everything about her screamed complication. Her laughter, her quiet glances, the way she carried herself like she had survived storms I couldn't even imagine. And yet, there was a tenderness there, a vulnerability, as if she was daring me to notice, daring me to care, daring me to cross some invisible boundary. I was aware of every second, every sound, every flutter in my chest. And then, just as the moment seemed suspended, the sharp trill of the cafe doorbell sliced through the quiet. Her head turned, eyes widening fractionally, and I felt a jolt of panic. Someone had arrived, someone new, and I had no idea what would happen next. My pulse hammered, my hands froze over the notebook, and I realized this was no longer a quiet crush. This was the start of something I wasn't ready for, and yet I couldn't step back. Her gaze met mine one last time before she moved, and in that look, I felt every word unspoken, every hesitation, every risk hanging between us. I couldn't stop thinking about her after that day. The way she had said it, the teasing warning about my friend, kept replaying in my head like a loop I couldn't break. I wanted to hate the pull I felt, wanted to tell myself it was ridiculous, that she was older, experienced, complicated, and I was just stumbling through my 20s. But none of that mattered when I remembered the way her hand had hovered over her cup, trembling ever so slightly, as if she were holding back more than just coffee. She lived a life that seemed so carefully stitched together. I had caught glimpses of it in our short conversations, the soft way she spoke about her late husband, how she mentioned nights spent alone with a book instead of people, how she lingered in the cafe even when her table was cleared, as though it was a place of quiet exile and subtle comfort. There was pride there, but also, sometimes, a flash of loneliness she tried to hide. And I realized I wanted to be the one who saw that, who stepped into her quiet spaces without breaking them. Me? My life was messy in a different way. College, odd jobs, too much time thinking about what I wasn't doing, what I wasn't enough for. I was 22 and still figuring out how to be someone who mattered in the world. And here she was, 40-something, graceful, and devastatingly aware of her own boundaries, and somehow, I had tangled myself in her orbit. The risk wasn't just in the age gap, though that hovered in my chest like a lead weight. It was the invisible line between her world and mine. She had lived decades I hadn't seen. She'd loved, lost, learned things I was only beginning to grasp. And me. I was supposed to be just a younger man, maybe a fleeting distraction, maybe a mistake she'd later regret. But every time she laughed softly, every time her gaze lingered too long, every time her hand brushed mine, accidental or not, I felt drawn deeper, like gravity had a taste I couldn't resist. And I knew she felt it too. There were pauses in her speech, just long enough to make me question if I'd imagined the softness in her eyes. Small gestures, the way she leaned toward me when she thought no one was watching, the faint quickening of her breath when our fingers brushed. Moments that said more than words ever could, moments I wanted to bottle and keep for myself. One evening, I stayed late at the cafe, pretending to grade papers I didn't have. She came in, carrying her usual folder of papers, tired but smiling, the sort of smile that made everything else in the world fade. We talked quietly, voices low, edges of conversation flirting with confession but never crossing the line. When she leaned over the counter to hand me a coffee, our fingers brushed. I froze, pretending to adjust my notebook, but I could feel the warmth spreading from that brief contact. Her eyes met mine, holding something I couldn't name, acceptance? Curiosity? Longing? And I felt my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. Then she tilted her head, eyes soft, and said nothing. We just lingered there, standing close in the fading light, aware of each other's breaths, each heartbeat, each pause. And in that silence I realized we were both pretending we could step back. But neither of us wanted to. I wasn't supposed to be here that night. The cafe was nearly empty, the hum of the espresso machine louder than usual, and I was supposed to be home grading papers or at least pretending to. But something, her presence, the pull I couldn't name, kept me there, lingering near the counter as she cleaned up, moving with the ease of someone who had done this 100 times and yet carried a rhythm that seemed entirely her own. We talked in bits, fragmented sentences, pauses stretching longer than words. She laughed at a joke I hadn't even fully made, and I caught myself staring, fingers tightening around my mug. I knew it was wrong. I should have stepped back. But when she looked at me, the way she did, like she'd spotted the part of me I never showed anyone, I couldn't. Then the door opened too loudly. I froze. A man stepped in, her brother, she said later, though in the moment I had no context. She straightened instantly, careful, polite, her posture rigid in a way that screamed caution. My pulse jumped. I could feel my chest thundering. "Hey, I didn't think anyone was here," he said. His eyes flicked to me briefly, just long enough for me to feel the sudden, sharp awareness of my own intrusion. "Just finishing up," she said smoothly, brushing off the tension in her voice, but the faint tremor in her hands betrayed her calm. She turned to him fully, and I watched her body shift like she was putting a wall between us, one I wanted to cross more than anything. I wanted to leave, to vanish, to be respectful. But my legs refused. I stayed, pretending to check my phone, though I wasn't reading anything. Every time she glanced my way, I felt caught, exposed. And the way her eyes flicked briefly to mine, like a secret we shared, made the air unbearable. Her brother left eventually, laughing at something she said. The cafe returned to quiet, but something had changed. The tension between us felt thicker, almost tangible. I took a step closer when she leaned over to put away sugar packets. Her hand brushed mine, this time deliberate. My heart leapt, and I could see her hesitate, fingers lingering just a fraction too long. "I shouldn't," I started, voice barely audible, and then I stopped. She raised a hand, quieting me, eyes soft but firm. "Don't," she whispered. "Not yet." I wanted to press, to lean in, to ignore the rules we both knew existed. Instead, I nodded, swallowing a groan, my chest tight with frustration and desire. The gap between us felt both impossibly small and infinitely wide. And then my phone buzzed. I glanced down. A text from my roommate, asking if I was coming home, and I realized how absurd it was, normal life creeping in on this impossible, fragile world we had carved for ourselves. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. She caught my gaze again, a faint smile tugging at her lips. No words were spoken, but the message was clear: neither of us could step back entirely. Not now, not ever, if this, the thing between us, was real. And yet, the risk lingered like a knife's edge, thrilling and terrifying. One wrong move, one discovery, and everything could shatter. I wanted to lean in anyway, but instead I just breathed, and watched her move across the cafe, feeling more alive, and more guilty, than I'd ever dared. The rain started just as I left the cafe, fat drops spattering against my jacket. I should have been annoyed, but instead, I felt strangely alive, my thoughts tangled around her, around the way she had looked at me tonight, soft, sharp, unreadable. I walked faster, pretending it was about avoiding the rain, but really I was trying to chase down the courage I didn't have. I didn't expect to see him. Her ex-colleague, the one she mentioned in passing a week ago, stood by the corner of the street. He smiled at her the way people smile when they think they have a claim, and my chest twisted. A sudden, hot jealousy I tried to suppress clawed its way out. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. I wasn't supposed to feel like this, but I did. Every laugh she gave him, every casual glance, felt like a blow I couldn't dodge. She noticed me almost immediately, eyes flicking with that subtle panic that always made me want to reach for her. She didn't see the storm inside me yet. "It's nothing," she said softly, though her voice had that sharp edge, half defense, half warning. I wanted to argue, to tell her that yes, it mattered, that it mattered more than she could know. But my voice caught in my throat, tangled in fear and desire. I could feel her hesitation, the tiny shift in her stance, the way she leaned back slightly but didn't leave. And that's when it happened. I stepped closer, almost without thinking, just to feel the space between us shrink, just to feel her presence without anyone else intruding. My hand brushed hers, lingering longer than appropriate, and I saw the flicker in her eyes. Shock? Curiosity? Fear? All of it at once. I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted, voice raw, tremulous, almost a whisper. My confession wasn't about words, really. It was about every second I had spent thinking of her, every stolen glance, every heartbeat that screamed for more than friendship. She looked away, biting her lip, her hand twitching as if it wanted to flee but couldn't. "You shouldn't," she said finally, but the pause that followed it carried everything she wasn't saying. Desire, risk, the thrill of the forbidden. I wanted to reach for her face, to tell her that it didn't matter what was right, what was safe, what the world would say. But I didn't. I stayed still, trembling, because this, the moment before everything, was fragile, dangerous, and perfect. Her gaze returned to me, hesitant, raw, and I felt like we were both holding our breath, suspended on some invisible edge. One misstep could destroy us, or maybe, finally, it could set us free. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, illuminating the small space between us. I wanted to close it. I wanted to cross it. I wanted her to. But the rain, the shadows, the risk, and her unspoken boundaries kept us frozen. Then, a car honked somewhere down the street. She flinched at the sound, and in that moment, I realized how quickly everything could shatter. My heart hammered, chest tight, hands itching to do something irreversible. And as I reached out again, just a fraction closer, the tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight, leaving us poised on the brink of something we could never take back. I hadn't expected to see him again, the one from earlier, her ex-colleague. But there he was, leaning casually against the cafe door as if he owned the space, eyes scanning the street until they landed on me. I froze. Something in his expression, the way he smiled, knowing, almost smug, made my stomach drop. She noticed him too. Her face tightened, lips pressing together, jaw stiffening in a way that spoke louder than words. I didn't think he'd be here," she said, voice trembling just enough to betray her calm. Before I could respond, he waved at her, loudly, like everyone on the street should know he mattered. My chest ached, a raw, burning knot forming. And then, almost without realizing it, he called out, "I see you've been spending time with him." Time stopped. My hands clenched at my sides. Every nerve in me screamed, every pulse pounding, as I realized he had seen, or thought he had seen, something he shouldn't have. And her reaction, the way her shoulders dropped slightly, that tiny flicker of guilt in her eyes, made my heart lurch. It's not what you think," she started, but her words faltered. Her eyes, those impossibly soft, knowing eyes, darted to me, and I caught a trace of panic I hadn't seen before. She was flustered, vulnerable in a way that made me want to reach for her and shield her from the world, and from him. He smirked. "Right. Sure. I guess some things aren't meant to stay secret, huh?" The implication was sharp, deliberate. My stomach sank. I wanted to defend her, to shout, to push him away, but the words wouldn't come. I wasn't supposed to get involved, not yet. And yet, my hand itched to brush hers, to remind her that I was there, that I was hers in this small, impossible way. She glanced at me, lips parted slightly, and I caught the subtle trembling in her fingers. There it was, the confession she wouldn't voice, the risk she'd tried to contain. And for the first time, I realized how fragile everything was. All the quiet moments, all the stolen glances, all the tension we'd nurtured, they could shatter in an instant. I wanted to yell at him, to demand he leave, to tell him that this, us, wasn't his business. But she reached for my arm instead, a light, trembling touch that grounded me in the middle of chaos. "Not here," she whispered, eyes flicking nervously between us, her breath shallow. Her closeness was a lifeline, but it also made everything worse. I could feel the heat from her body, smell the faint scent of coffee and rain and something uniquely hers, and it made me ache in ways I hadn't allowed myself to. The ex-colleague laughed, finally, turning to leave, but the damage had been done. We both knew the rules had changed. Nothing would ever feel safe again. Not our conversations, not our silences, not the stolen spaces we'd carved for ourselves. She stayed close, hand barely brushing mine, and I realized that even in the face of chaos, I couldn't pull away. And I could tell, by the way her fingers lingered, by the catch in her breath, that she wouldn't either. The rain fell harder, dripping from the streetlights, masking the tremor in my chest. We didn't speak, but our eyes said everything. Danger was here, risk had arrived, and yet, we were both still unwilling to step back. The cafe was closed when I found myself there again, the keys still in the lock, lights dimmed, silence thicker than any words could cut through. She was already inside, standing by the counter, coat half on, hair damp from the rain, eyes scanning the empty room as if she expected someone, me, or maybe herself. I hesitated at the door, heart hammering. Every instinct told me to leave, to respect the invisible boundary we'd both tried to honor. But the moment I saw her, I knew it was pointless. She had that look again, the soft, questioning gaze that made my chest ache and my head spin at the same time. "I can't stop thinking about it," I blurted before I could stop myself. The words tumbled out raw, unpolished. "About you. About this. About us." She froze, her hand tightening around the counter, as though she were bracing herself. I know," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. Then she laughed nervously, a sound that made something ache deep inside me. "And that's exactly the problem." I stepped closer. The distance between us seemed to shrink with every heartbeat. "Problem or not, I can't care about that right now. My voice faltered. I wanted to tell her everything, to explain the longing, the ache, the late nights spent replaying the smallest moments we'd shared. I wanted her to know I wasn't just some boy caught in infatuation. I was caught on her. Her eyes softened, glimmering with emotion I couldn't name. She shook her head, brushing damp hair behind her ear. "It's not simple," she said, voice trembling. "It's dangerous. And I." She stopped, faltering mid-sentence, letting the unspoken fill the space between us. That was enough. I reached for her hand slowly, as if the smallest movement could shatter everything. She didn't pull away. Her fingers trembled against mine, warmth and hesitation colliding in a way that made my pulse surge. "Do we?" I started, unsure if I should finish. The words felt impossible, heavy with risk, with fear, with desire. She nodded ever so slightly, eyes holding mine like a promise and a warning all at once. "We can't pretend anymore," she said, breath hitching. "Not with this, not with us." I leaned closer, heart racing, and for a second, everything else, the rain, the ex-colleague, the impossible age gap, the world outside, vanished. We were suspended in a space of pure, terrifying truth, raw and fragile. Then she hesitated. A small, almost imperceptible step back, as if testing herself, testing me, testing whatever boundary we had crossed. "But," her voice trailed, leaving a question hanging like a fragile thread in the air. I smiled, not out of joy, but relief that we were finally here, exposed, messy, human. "Then we deal with the rest later," I said softly, fingers tightening around hers. "We start with this. With us." Her eyes glimmered, lips parting in that quiet, uncertain way. And just as the tension peaked, just as I thought we would close the space between us, the door rattled with a sudden knock, and the world crept back in. We froze. Hands still touching, breaths mingling, and for a heartbeat, nothing else existed but the weight of our choice, and the unspoken promise that, no matter what came next, we had finally found each other. The rain had stopped by the time we stepped out of the cafe, leaving the streets glistening under the dim city lights. The air smelled like wet asphalt and coffee, a strange mix that somehow felt like new beginnings. I kept my hand brushed against hers, careful, hesitant, as if the contact alone could tether us to this fragile reality we'd chosen. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I can't believe we're doing this," she said, voice low, almost teasing, though I could hear the tremor beneath the surface. Her eyes held a mixture of fear, excitement, and something I couldn't name, but wanted to learn. "We're not doing anything," I said, though I knew it was a lie. We were doing everything, stepping off a cliff we couldn't see the bottom of, and yet we kept moving forward. We walked in silence for a while, the city around us quiet except for the occasional car splashing through puddles. Every step felt like a negotiation between caution and desire, each glance a small confirmation that we'd crossed into something we couldn't unsee. "I shouldn't be here," she admitted finally, pausing on the corner, the glow of a street lamp catching the curve of her cheek. "I have responsibilities, obligations. The world won't just wait for us." I nodded, understanding more than I could articulate. "But sometimes, it can wait," I said softly, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "Sometimes it has to." Her lips parted slightly, and I caught that flicker, the small, fleeting acknowledgement that we had both chosen this moment, reckless as it was. I could feel the tension of months of longing, hesitation, and unspoken words settling, folding into something quiet and steady. She smiled then, small but real, a smile that reached her eyes and softened the lines life had etched across her face. Maybe we'll figure it out," she said, almost a question, almost a hope. I squeezed her hand gently. "We will," I promised, though I knew it wasn't certainty. It was just a commitment to try, to navigate the messiness together. We continued down the street, slow and deliberate, letting the night absorb our fears, our exhilaration, the echo of everything that had led us here. No words were needed to fill the spaces between us. Our silence carried more meaning than anything we could have said. At the corner, we stopped again. She looked at me, eyes searching, lips curling. "I guess this is the beginning then," she whispered. I nodded, heart full, chest tight with anticipation and relief. "Yes." I said, brushing my thumb across hers. The beginning. And just like that, the impossible became possible. Not perfect, not easy, but ours. Every risk, every stolen glance, every quiet confession had led us here, and for the first time, I believed in the fragile, human magic of chance and choice. We walked on, hands brushing, breaths mingling, and I realized something I hadn't dared before, that love, messy and unpredictable as it was, could be brave. Could survive hesitation and fear. Could exist, even when the world didn't understand. And in that moment, I knew we'd figure out the rest together, one imperfect, beautiful step at a time.